Congressman Scott Perry is a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, welcome to the show. What exactly well, I'm Charles sitting in for Neil, but what should we be doing?
Sorry, Charles.
What should we be doing right now? What's the proper response at this moment?
Well, there's a couple of proper responses. First of all, signaling to the world and to that we're going to export LNG, number one. Number two, Keystone Pipeline, signaling that we're going to export Canadian oil on and flood the market with that, lower the cost, and get the Russian boot off of Western Europe's neck and throat regarding their fuel prices and fuel availability. I think that'd be number one, the economic pressure. Number two, we have to get the UN involved. Ukraine has asked for the UN since April to come in. We can't get the Security Council to do it. Oh, I wonder why. Because Russia is on the Security Council and won't vote for it. Meanwhile, they're telling the rest of the world there's nothing to see there, nothing to see here. There obviously is something to see here. You know, an SA-11 is not your garden variety shoulder-fired man-pad. It is a sophisticated piece of armament, usually on a tracked vehicle, missiles about 20 feet long, probably, or longer, and a fire control radar to boot that goes with it to shoot down this airplane. Russia is heavily involved in this in this fight. And the international community needs to recognize that and start working towards sanctions and really isolating Russia so we don't have a resurgent USSR-type activity happening all over Eastern Europe and and that European continent.
Well, here's the thing: your answer one and answer two, what they have in common is we're asking Europe to go against their own economic interests at this particular point. Now, I agree with you with respect to LNG and Keystone. So what do you make of the idea that today, when the president spoke, he took Europe to task without acknowledging that, hey, we could actually free them so that they can make these independent decisions? I'm sure Europe doesn't want to help. They don't want to embolden Vladimir Putin. They don't want the USSR casting a shadow over them anymore. Why don't we embolden them? To your point, what's stopping this message from reaching the White House?
What's stopping this message is the radical environmentalist left. They refuse to acknowledge the importance of LNG and exporting LNG. They absolutely refuse to acknowledge the Keystone Pipeline, not only for our country, but for the geopolitical situation. And the president is so wed to that radical left-wing base that he simply just can't utter the words.
How embarrassed should we be as Americans right now? Listen, we know Vladimir Putin's the evil Darth Vader guy here in all of this, but to a certain degree, and you've already laid it out with your points here, we could have been pushing these things a long time ago. How embarrassed should we be, and do you think this will be enough to maybe to get the American public to nudge the administration?
What's really tragic, I don't know if it's embarrassing, because I think, unfortunately, whether this is the president's policy, this is not necessarily what most Americans believe in. What's tragic is that most of this could have been avoided, and most of this can be avoided in the future with a couple reasonable policies that take into consideration the geopolitical situation of reality, as opposed to what some of these folks want to believe is this pie-in-the-sky situation where real politics doesn't exist. That's the tragedy here, that we're living under this fantasy, and we don't have to be. And most Americans don't agree with it. It's just this administration and a couple individuals at the top of it running it, that, again, favoring the ultra left wing of the party. That's the tragedy. It
is a tragedy. Representative Perry, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now we go to Gaza, where we're hearing of